Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday, the 28th of March, and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So, Phil, before we go any further, happy birthday.
Yeah, I'll be having a party for one, I think. I don't think we've plans to go anywhere.
Just as well.
Yeah, I think I'll be staying in for this one. Not sure. And the cards don't seem to be piling up with any presents either. So I think it's a bit of a surreal one. But I'm not on my own there, am I? So there's people in worse positions than me. So it will be a birthday to remember.
It will.
But I can say it's not a big one yet. So yes, we'll. The big one is next year. So we'll wait for that one. Hopefully we'll be through it by then.
Yes. Yeah. So it is. We haven't done the headlines for, well, it's actually 2 weeks now, because we did the special last weekend with Ben and on the mental health awareness. Yeah. So the whole world and the industry has changed since then, isn't it?
I mean, to be fair, it's changing by the minute, by the hour, by the day, isn't it? I mean, there is a lot going on, and I think we're going to go through some shout outs. There's been a lot of activity. We have got quite a few headlines this week as well, but I think what is testament to the industry and businesses and people in general is the way people are corralling together with this and coming together and helping each other and supporting each other. So it's a massive shout out to everybody, isn't it, that is involved and helping everybody else out.
Yeah, it really is heartening to see some of the moves and some of the comments on social media, that there's a lot of goodwill behind a lot of the businesses out there. And it's worth just giving a shout out at this stage to all the franchise dealers and all the independent dealers who, of course, have been forced to close down as a result of the pandemic. So we want to wish everyone well at this time, and we're glad you're tuned in and listening, and we'll try and keep you up to date with all the news that really matters.
Yeah, and we've got news headlines. We've got some special interviews as well that we've been on with. So there's it's great that there is a lot of people out there wanting to share insight, share ideas, share what they're doing, and things like that. So it's fantastic that everybody's getting involved.
Yeah. Now, earlier this week, we actually recorded and instantly put out an interview with Robert Forrester, the chief exec of Virtue Motors, which, that got a lot of attention, a lot of comments on social media. And I must say, Robert was on absolutely top form, because it was on the same day. We recorded the interview early afternoon, and at 4:00 that afternoon, the whole of the Virtue Motors network was closed. So we spoke to Robert, just a couple of hours before that happened. So that was an interview we put out during the week, but we're actually going to include it at the end of this show. So if you haven't heard it, do stay tuned, because there's a lot of useful insight there, and just seeing the big picture from a dealer group boss and how the pandemic is affecting business.
No, you're right, and there's a lot of good stuff being put out there. Big shout out to Ben, who we had Ben on the other week with both Craig Maley from Cox Automotive and Gary, who did the book on the journey of cancer. And that was a fantastic podcast. But again, Ben are coming to the forefront for the industry, the publishing help and support for people going through the coronavirus at the minute and things like that, and just trying to help everybody a little bit on what's happening out there. And Car Dealer magazine, shout out to those guys. They've got an advice section on there. They've been doing live interviews. There's some fantastic stuff going on there, and the last one we've just seen is an interview with Dash Gupta that they've done, and again, similar to the Robert one, a very open and honest and candid interview there as to what they're doing and things like that. So great work.
Yeah. So headlines this week, we'll look at what car retailer suppliers are doing for customers in the wake of the coronavirus. An update on used car valuations. So some interesting comments and observations from CAP on March, and really looking forward to how valuations will be treated from now onwards. So a bit of insight there. Got an update on the MOT situation, because of course earlier this week the 6-month extension was announced. So how's that affecting garages that have remained open? We've got a couple of really good stories on both an OEM and a dealer group who are supporting the NHS. And we'll finish off this week with what I think is a really good piece of analysis from Autocar on lessons to be learned from what's happened in China. Because, of course, China is 2, if not 3 months ahead of us. It looks, from the news reports, as though they might be coming out of it now. But this piece of analysis is looking at what happened to the car industry during the shutdown. So we'll get onto that.
That's great. So we'll get on with the first story. We'll try and get through some of these because, like I say, we've got the interview that we tagged onto the end with Robert that's worth a listen as well. So the first one, as you say there, Curtis, is in AM Online, and car retail suppliers cut fees to offer coronavirus business support. And I think everybody sort of started with this, didn't they? And really to help the dealers and the cash flow and to get to the, get those guys continuing trying to do the business right up to the last minute where possible. And as you say, a lot of dealers have all dealers now essentially have shut the doors, but it's kind of trying to help these guys. And some are still operating, as we know, in the digital space. The majority of them will be still trying to take orders and do business through the online proposition. But again, from AA, eBay Motors Group, Judge Services, amongst a few that have come to the offer free service, and in a bid to help car retail sector through the current outbreak.
Yeah, it's a good roundup, this story. So eBay Motors Group, for example, they won't be charging for classifieds during April, but they've also extended payment terms for March. And we've got the AA, as you say, and Judge Service also offering packages to dealers here.
No, and it's about trying to help the cash flow, isn't it? I mean,
it's all about cash flow, isn't it?
Yeah, and as Phil Jones said there, who's at the head of eBay Motors Group, it's a difficult time for the car dealers, and with many facing big questions about how to manage through this period. They're pleased to be able to provide the service to the customers at this time, and I think that's sort of been portrayed by everybody, and it is about everybody getting involved and everybody helping each other through this tough time. And it's great for them to do this, and it is going to hit their bottom line as it is all the others, because it's lost revenue for whatever period of time this goes on for. But they're not on their own. Everybody is in this same boat, and particularly some of the dealers, from your large AM100 groups through to your small independents, they're all feeling the pain on this one, aren't they?
Yeah. So next story is from Fleet News, and the headline is Coronavirus Mannheim auction programs halted. So this is a report on Mannheim moving quickly to close its auction halls. You've probably got a bit more detail on this one, Phil.
Yeah, I think from a Cox Automotive and Mannheim perspective, it was really about the health and well-being of both the employees and the customers. And we're the first ones to move from the physical environment and move straight to the simulcast online. So that was to try and reduce the risk of spread within the physical environment, both again from a colleague's perspective and a customer's perspective. And then obviously it was a very tough decision, but it was a case of the next stage was really to close altogether. Because whether you buy a car online or you buy it physically, there's still movement of a vehicle, there's still interaction between people, etc. And it was a case of supporting what the government was trying to do following the government's instructions, and they were very clear about the, shutting down with immediate effect, and we're the first ones to do that. It wasn't about commercial income. It wasn't anything, it was purely and simply, we wanted to do the right thing for our customers and colleagues, and that's the decision that was made, and I'm glad to say that it was the right decision. And we'll be watching things very closely, keeping close contact with our customers and colleagues throughout this tough time. So, again, the right thing to do.
Yeah. Now, next headline is from AM Online, and it's used car valuation freeze could stem coronavirus impact on residuals. So this is one of the big unknowns at the moment, isn't it? Yeah. What will be the impact on used car values? And this piece of analysis from CAP found that values declined 2.2% in March, which, I mean, all things considered, that's not bad going at all, is it?
No, not at all. I think, we were, I think, 1.5% up year to date for the first 3 trading months. So that the market can take it in terms of the values. I think, again, it was the right thing for CAP HPI to do, a very pragmatic look at it. They saw that volumes through the data were reducing. The type of activity had changed. It wasn't normal transactional activity. There was an element of liquidation to maximise cash flow. There was an element of chances, should we say, trying to pick up opportunities, cheap product, and for CAP to reflect that could have been the wrong thing to do. There is a lot of unknowns. We haven't got experience of this. I think Darren Martin is clear that to look at 2008, 2009, you can't really do that. It was a different time then. It was a different impact. It was a financial crash. This is different, and they've done the right thing, as you say. Down 2.2% at 3 year 60, which is an average of, I think, minus £275, and minus 1.8% at 1 year 20, which is about £425 down. So, they've done the right thing. I think they're going to be monitoring the situation very closely throughout the period of shutdown. There will be probably minor movements around seasonality, I think, probably, but again, it'll be a case of when we get back to normality, and they'll be taking a separate view at that point as to when they start reflecting the market. And I think it's hands off to these guys that they did the right thing, very pragmatic, and the right thing to do for the industry, because they could have, we didn't want to see a knock-on effect like we saw back in 2008, 2009.
Yeah, and there's a good quote here from Darren Martin from CAP HPI saying, in effect, if vehicles are not selling in quantities anywhere close to normal, we will not be adjusting. So although CAP HPI don't actually use the word freeze, that's kind of, I guess, what's implied. They're not going to be adjusting these figures too much.
Yeah, there's no activity. There's no cars going through the auctions, either physically or online, in terms of movement. There is potentially, I say, there's retail activity. There's retail activity taking place in the online environment in terms of deposits being taken and secure, vehicles being secured online. But actually, when it comes down to the full transaction, the movement of those vehicles, etc., nothing's happening now. And I think that's the right call for these guys to do that.
Yeah, and it's worth looking at the analysis from CAP HPI, which you can find on their website, because they really do drill down into March, and it is a month of 2 halves, so it's quite interesting to see their interpretation of what's happened over the course of the month.
And there is some insight in there as well around the future values. From Andrew Mee, who looks after the future forecasting. Again, the editorial is there online for people to download and review. And again, at the minute, they're not adjusting anything. relative to the current situation. So it's worth having a look and sort of having a view of that, because I think it'll put a lot of people's minds at rest that they are taking a very pragmatic view.
Yeah. So you're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector, and available online at motortraderadio.com and by subscribing free on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Deezer, and SoundCloud.
So moving on to motortrader.com, and it's interesting because we talk about it on in Robert's interview, don't we? That as you say, we got at the end of the show, and we recorded earlier on in the week, and there was a question around MOTs,
Yes.
and we won't ruin, if you've not listened to the interview yet, what the view was on that at the time. But it very quickly came out that they were going to freeze, or not freeze, should we say, but allow a 6-month postponement on vehicles requiring an MOT after the 20. Is it on or after the 29th of March? They've decided to put a 6-month extension on, and
Yes.
it's an interesting one, this one, because you can take a view that it's lost revenue opportunity, but we're in this case, this situation that we don't know how long we're going to be in lockdown for. And I think it's possibly that the government have thought, well, let's remove this as a concern. And they've made that decision, haven't they? I don't know what your thoughts are on this one.
Yeah. You're right, because garages have been exempt from closing down. They're seen as an essential business. So this particular story, this is based on some research that Book My Garage did, and they recorded an 80% rise in MOT bookings following that 6-month exemption announcement, and that's because a lot of cars were caught betwixt and between, because if you needed your car MOT'd up to the 29th of March, you wouldn't qualify. So a lot of owners were going onto the Book My Garage website to get their cars in, get them booked in, and get them MOT'd. So even if they're sitting idle for the next few weeks, at least they are roadworthy, they are safe. So it's good that these garages have responded quickly to actually taking cars in and MOTing them.
Yeah, they do. There's a comment in there that despite many businesses closing for the next 3 weeks, and which is obviously the initial sort of lockdown, they're saying that they've currently got 47% of garages open on Book My Garage. So there is going to be demand there, isn't there? That's reality. If we look at the essential workers, NHS, and that kind of, there's still demand for vehicles, and we're going to talk about that next in terms of the way some of the manufacturers and dealer groups are supporting that. But there are vehicles on the road, be it commercial vehicles or cars, to support logistic movements of food and essential work and things like that at the minute. So there is a necessity for these garages to remain open and remain active supporting it.
Yeah, and I did notice over the course of the week on LinkedIn, quite a few garages were posting pictures of ambulances, police cars on ramps, because these vehicles have got to be maintained. They've got to be MOT'd.
Yeah, you're right, and I think there was interesting debate on LinkedIn this week around the Irish market and talking about Northern Ireland, and in a conversation with someone that actually, through other reasons prior to COVID-19, that they've had some issues over in Ireland where they've had a delay applied on MOTs due to issues with ramps within garages. So again, they've seen a drop, obviously, in revenues because of that, because people are just not getting work done. Because they don't need to, because it's not got an MOT that they need to put it through. But again, when we come out the other side, there's going to be a huge demand, and depending when we come out, because I think you spoke on the interview that 3 years ago it was a big March month. So there's a lot of cars out there due for an MOT. It's their first MOT this March, and as we approach September, again, it was a big September. 3 years ago. So, there's going to be a higher than normal demand for MOTs throughout the 2 months of March and September from 3 years ago. So, again, the business will come back when we come out of the other side, won't it?
Yeah, yeah. So the next two stories are really about how a car maker and a dealer group are supporting the NHS. And we've picked these two stories. There actually were more, but it kind of illustrates what's going on out there and the support that's being given to the NHS. So the first story was from Motor Trader, and the headline is MG to supply 100 EVs for NHS staff via dealer network. So this is the supply of 100 plug-in MG ZSs to NHS agencies across the UK. And the first of these cars have already been supplied to Lancashire and South Cumbria NHS Trust by the MG dealer Chorley Group. So this is a great story, and it's just showing how MG, which after all, it is a British brand, is supporting the NHS.
No, you're right. I mean, it's fantastic news from them guys, and again, it's followed up in Car Dealer with the news from Chorley Group, and they've also followed it up with Nissan Dealer Group. Chorley Group is halving the cost of car repairs and servicing for NHS employees and care workers as a way of thanking them for their supreme efforts during the crisis. So, again, it goes back to what we said right at the start of the show. It's about everybody coming together, helping each other out, supporting those in need, the elderly, the essential workers, NHS, etc. And I think that's a testament to everybody that there's a lot of support going on.
Yeah. Now, the final story before the interview comes from Autocar, and the headline is Coronavirus and the Chinese Car Industry, What We Can Learn. Now, this is a really, really good piece written by Jim Holder, who's the editor of Autocar. So if you have got a bit of spare time this week, it's worth reading. Put the kettle on, have a cup of coffee, and have a read, because it takes a look at the Chinese experience and where China is now with its car market, because we actually reported on this at the time, and the pain that the Chinese market was going through over the course of February, where at one stage new car sales were actually down 92%. Now, they did recover, if recover's the right word, to being down by 82% by the end of February. But what this piece looks at is the amount of activity of customers going online, because during a shutdown, customers were on the internet. So they were looking at cars. So if they were considering a new car purchase, they were doing all their research and actually transacting online during this crisis.
Yeah, and it is. They say it's a very interesting story, and I think talking to some of the analysts this week, there's going to be a lot of learnings from China with this in terms of the recovery and what's gone on. And we've been speaking, haven't we, this week, Curtis, around that potentially at the back end of this there is going to be a change of behaviours. There's increased levels of people working from home, as we know. Some people actually will remain doing that or partially remain doing that. There's been a move from public transport into that sub £3,000 to £5,000 vehicles, particularly in the London territories, that the people moved away from those public transportations. And the question is, and we don't know yet, whether those will remain. Will people start to look at how they use public transport, if they use public transport, how they hold meetings, whether it's digitally or physically, and move it, and the whole world of mobility. And again, this drive from physical to purely online, because before it was a case of that relationship between the e-commerce world and that physical world. And now, we've got dealer groups that are purely, all they can do is purely operate in that digital space. And there'll be a lot of learnings from this, won't there, when we come out of the back end of it?
Yeah, definitely. And within the article, there's two or three talking heads that Jim speaks to, but he doesn't say who they are. They're all industry bosses who clearly want to remain anonymous. But there's one telling quote here. It says the number of online sales went from a few hundred to thousands and thousands. It sounds obvious, but we have been waiting for online sales channels to really take off. Now, I think we can say they have, because even as people have come out again, the growth has continued. So, you know, that's there will. You're right, Phil. There'll be a lot of dealer groups, a lot of manufacturers looking at this and seeing how they transact in the future.
Yeah, and how it works. You know,
Yeah.
there'll be a lot of learnings in terms of how the systems held up during this period, how they operated during this period to manage the online platforms. So you can see it having some impact as we come out the other side. I mean, obviously, the longer we're in lockdown, the the bigger impact it potentially has. But there'll be a lot of learnings from this, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. So yeah, fantastic. Some great headlines there. We've tried to keep it a little bit shorter than normal. We've tried to, there is a lot of good news out there in the market, in the Curtis. A lot of people doing some good stuff out there, and we'll continue to try and report it. We'll try and keep away from the negativity around it all, because there is some challenges out there. There's a lot going on. So please keep tuned in.
Yep. So you've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector. Many thanks for tuning in. So do join Phil and I again next weekend, and do look out for our special interviews during the week, because we will be posting them from time to time. Until then, stay tuned for a special interview we recorded earlier in the week with Virtue Motors CEO Robert Forrester.